Welcome to our series on faith and life. Can you believe that as we are speaking, there are millions of people seeking a home? People seeking safety, people seeking belonging, people seeking a roof over their head. In Australia alone, every night, 100,000 people are sleeping on the streets. And it's a really significant time in history of this great search for a homeland, for a place of belonging. And I think this external reality also reflects an internal reality of people who are seeking a spiritual home, people who are seeking a home in the church and can't necessarily find one. And so you have people moving from place to place, not sure where they are happy. And we live in a moment that's very different in our history of mobility, of people treating the church like it's a restaurant and you pick and you choose what you want and what you don't want. And we ask the question, have we really committed ourselves to a home? Because the home that we have, the home that we live in, we don't say, oh, today I think I'll go and stay at the neighbour's house, or I think I'll go and stay down the road, or across town might be nice. Because then it wouldn't be a home. You know, St. Augustine had a great saying that he spoke about the whole Christ, head and members. And you can't just embrace the head. It looks a little strange just having a head. But the whole Christ is the head and members. Now, this is the part that people find difficult. You know, they'll say, the church is great, it's a pity there are people in it. And we have to acknowledge that one of those people who disturbs things and who disturbs others is me. One of those people who fail along the way is me. And you'll often hear that story. Well, when you find a perfect church, don't go and join it because you'll ruin it, because you're imperfect. And so today we deal a lot with that sense of imperfection and scandal that has really hit the headlines all over the world. And so the witness of life in the church is to some extent diminished by the failures of some. But what we have to remember is that this is Christ's body. This is a place where He dwells and a place where He wants people to be safe and have a home and have a place where they can invite others. So the church is not so different from our own family home. Sometimes when I get discouraged, when I see headlines that are not very flattering for the life of the church, I take time to remember the incredible good that is taking place. And it's really important that we remember that, because sometimes the media can give us a focus, which is that it's all bad and that we can't trust anyone. And why would you want to belong to a place like that? And so we have to remember who we belong to, that we actually belong to Jesus, and that we are not defined by the bad actions of some of the members of the church. Because each day I encounter young men and women, mums, priests, bishops, who are giving their lives to Jesus in the life of the church. That they are sacrificing themselves so that others may find life. And so it's a healthy reminder to me, and I'm sure to others, that when we see these things posted in print media or on television, it's like it's not the whole picture. But it is part of the picture that we have to deal with. And I think it's really important that as adult Christians, we reject the bad and that we affirm the good and contribute to the good ourselves, because there is a responsibility on each one of us. You know, creating a home for people is not a simple thing, and it's not something that everybody else does. It's something that we are invited to participate in. You know, we can't have this anticipation that it's up to everybody else. It's up to the priest, it's up to the religious, it's up to those who are more committed. No, it's up to each of us. That in today's world, finding a home is so important. And accepting people as they move towards a home or look at, is this a place I want to be? You know, I work with a team that have outreach onto university campuses. And one of their goals is to create an on-campus community where students can come and go and feel like there is a sense of belonging. Now, it's not only for Christian students, but for those who are journeying and looking for more and who are looking for a place of belonging. And I always remember the story of two Chinese students who came, and they didn't have a lot of language, and they joined with the group in a lot of their social activities to develop English language skills, etc. And one day, one Chinese student brought a new student along. And these were his words: "Stay with these people. They will look after you. They've been like a family to me." Now, these are the words that you love to hear. For me, I really enjoyed hearing those words. When we hear those words, we understand that we're doing the first part of our job in evangelization, that of sharing the gospel. Because the gospel's got to be something that's tangible, that the good news has got to be reflected in the lives of the people who say they are affected and infected with the good news of Jesus Christ. And so when students begin to recognize that this small Christian community on campus can be a home for them, that they can see themselves as being part of it, then you actually have a situation where you are beginning to lay the foundations of trust. Now, that trust relationship is critical in the journey of faith. If people do not trust you, they will not take that journey with you. If people are working towards making a decision about faith, they look for people who are authentic, people who will live what they say they believe. And so this witness of a small community becomes actually quite critical. You know, we can have great theology, which we do have. You know, we have beautiful theological reflections on being the body of Christ, being the church, being what Christ called us to be. You know, Saint Therese being the hands and feet of Jesus in the world today. However, that has to be our response. We have to look like the hands and feet of Jesus in the world today. It's one thing to have a theological truth and reality, but it's another thing to live that. We actually have to give ourselves to that truth, that it might take flesh. You know, John's Gospel says, "And the Word became flesh." Jesus became flesh, became one of us, lived amongst us. And so, is the gospel real or not? Is it good news or isn't it good news? Is it just good news for believers? Or is it actually good news for those who aren't sure what they believe yet? And so there's a certain responsibility on us when it comes to helping people find a home, finding a place where they are welcome. What do we offer them? Do we offer them a smile? Do we offer them hospitality? Do we offer a meal? Do we offer a place where somebody will take time to explain things to them? Or do we just expect that they will follow the rules? And the rules on their own are not good enough without the person at the center of them. Without the person of Jesus Christ, just asking people to follow rules, it's not going to work. And certainly not in our culture, it's not going to work. And so, how do we make a home? A home where people can feel safe, feel like they can contribute, and feel like they can invite others to. And I think both of those things become important. And certainly my own experience of living life in community, I've just been incredibly graced. My wife and I have lived our whole lives our whole married lives in a lay community where we've brought up our children in the Emmanuel community in Brisbane. And it's just been such a grace because it certainly taught me when I first joined the community, long before anybody taught me anything about serving and about sacrificing for others, I got a job. My first role was to put out chairs. And so I actually experienced what it was to serve. Long before anybody taught me anything about it, I actually was doing it. And so this is the grace of community, because you actually see people putting good spiritual practices into work, putting them into action. And so it's not just something that you learn, something academic, it becomes something that is concrete, something that actually impacts your life and the life of others. So by putting out chairs, I learnt that this made life easier for others. So it was a role of service. Long before I entered into any leadership role, I learnt to put out chairs. And I think some of the other things around that as an experience of community, my wife spent 3 months in hospital. She went into early labours, so at 25 and a half weeks, she began to go into labour. Now, clearly, that's far too early. And so she spent the next 3 months in hospital. I had the other 2 kids at home. That was quite a challenge for 3 months to look after 2 little kids. I'd go up to the hospital during the day, and sometimes 2 or 3 times a week at least, I would take them up to the hospital in the afternoon or evening. And the support that we received during that experience was amazing. Support for myself in helping to look after the children, but support for my wife as well. She just kept having visitors. She was probably the most visited person in the hospital at the time. And the nurses kept asking the question, how come you get so many visitors? Where do they come from? And Chanel had the opportunity to tell them about the community that we belong to. And as you can imagine, it gets a little boring because she wasn't allowed out of bed at all for 3 months. So she just has to lie there and maybe read or do something. I'm sure she prayed a lot during that time. But she said it was very, very difficult. And if it was just for herself, she may not have been able to do it. But she said because of the child she was carrying inside of her, absolutely, she was ready to do that. But a whole bunch of the women got together, and it was nearly Christmas time, and filled one of those laundry baskets with little gifts. There was nothing in there that was overly expensive, but it took Chanel a very long time to unwrap all of these little gifts that were for the baby, and soap and all of these things. That very creative ladies. And this was a way of demonstrating the power of the gospel in community life through the service of someone who's sick. You know, some other examples of that in our community, the leader of our community, his son got cancer when he was 2 years old, and for the next 2 or 3 years, the community prayed 24 hours a day for that young child. 40 plus years later, he's alive and doing well and recovered from the cancer. But people would take these prayer times at all hours of the day or night in support of the family, in support of this young child who was struggling between life and death. And so I tell these stories because they're very practical. You know, there's lots of opportunities to pray and to support one another in that way. But I think, you know, it's Father Ron Rolheiser, who's a popular Canadian priest, writer, and he would say, when you see strong faith, you always see a strong faith community. Strong faith community. And he ultimately draws the conclusion that when people see faith demonstrated in that way, they will come to believe. That without such a demonstration of faith, they will not believe. And so in the way that we create a home for others that's visible, tangible, experiential, in a way that embraces them and which allows them to embrace the whole Christ. So there's this two-way action that they are challenged to embrace not Jesus alone, but Jesus who is head and members. So not just the head, but the members as well. And the members and the head embracing them. Today you hear more than a few people say, I want to follow Jesus, I want to live life with him, but I don't want to be part of a church. And there's an inconsistency in that. Why? I understand what people are saying. I understand that sometimes church can be difficult. However, this is the way that Jesus himself has chosen to reveal himself and manifest his presence in the world today. So really what we're saying is, well, Jesus, you had a really bad idea, and I don't see how you can possibly trust these people to represent you. The reality is, that's what Jesus has done. He's entrusted us with gifts for his body, you know, to lift up, to encourage, to confirm people, so that as communities together, we're not just focused on ourselves, young people, married people, aged people, together living the gospel in order to proclaim the gospel. Because ultimately, that's the mission that's been entrusted to us, to proclaim the gospel. But to proclaim good news that's actually visible, that we can see the impact of it, that we can see that our life without Jesus doesn't make sense. You know, doing the things we do doesn't make sense if Jesus is not real. And so in our sense of home, in our sense of welcome, we have to be welcoming. We have to be outgoing. Pope Francis calls us to be a church that's on the move, that goes out, that's not hidden behind closed doors, but a church that goes out and brings in. You know, this is the whole story of those who are lost and found. That it's Jesus' intention, it's God's intention to find and gather up those who are lost. And for us to create a home where they can come, where they can be safe, where they can grow in the Christian life, be strengthened, can contribute, and can be sent forth on mission. Because finding a home doesn't mean that you just find a cozy place. It's not just about me, ever. It's always about us. That God uses a people, calls a people, gathers a people together to reach a people who do not know Him. So my brothers and sisters, we have a challenge before us, the challenge to contribute, to make a home, to be part of that believing community, to find a place where we can actually live that out profoundly, dynamically, where we can contribute our gifts and invite others into that place of security, that place of living the gospel, so that we might witness to the presence of Jesus alive in the world today. That there's always a home waiting. So, I hope you've enjoyed our session on faith and life. Come and join us next week as we take another step on our journey.
A lot of talk in our church today about the new evangelisation, and we might ask, well, what's new about the new evangelisation? One thing that's new is that we're trying to renew the faith in people who should already be Catholic, should already be Christian. Individuals, families, communities, whole cultures that need to rediscover the gospel. And so what's new is that they're getting a new shot in the arm of faith, of evangelisation. Another thing that's new about it is the way that we do that, and the new media and groups like Shalom World TV are very important for bringing the gospel anew to our cultures, to our families, to each of us individually. And so I encourage all the viewers of Shalom World TV, and I encourage Shalom World TV themselves to keep up the good work, to keep watching this channel and to keep up the good work of presenting the Catholic faith to our world today.
Shalom World, God's own channel.